Chapter 34. In this world of ours, the activities of animal life seem to be limited to a plane or circle, as if that were an inherent necessity to the creatures of a planet which is perforce compelled to swing about the sun. A fish, for instance, may not pass out of the circle of the seas without courting annihilation. A bird may not enter the domain of the fishes without paying for it dearly. From the parasites of the flowers to the monsters of the jungle, in the deep we see clearly the circumscribed nature of their movements, the emphatic manner in which life has limited them to a sphere. And we are content to note the ludicrous and invariably fatal results which attend any effort on their part to depart from their environment. In the case of man, however, the operation of this theory of limitations has not as yet been so clearly observed. The laws governing our social life are not so clearly understood as to permit of a clear generalization. Still, the opinions, pleas, and judgments of society serve as boundaries, which are nonetheless real for being intangible. When men or women err, that is, pass out from the sphere in which they are accustomed to move, it is not as if the bird had intruded itself into the water or the wild animal into the haunts of man. Annihilation is not the immediate result. People may do no more than elevate their eyebrows in astonishment, laugh sarcastically, lift up their hands in protest. And yet so well defined is the sphere of social activity that he who departs from it is doomed. Born and bred in this environment, the individual is practically unfitted for any other state. He is like a bird accustomed to a certain density of atmosphere, and which cannot live comfortably at either higher or lower level. Lester sat down in his easy chair by the window after his brother had gone, and gazed ruminatively out over the flourishing city. Yonder was spread out before him, life with its concomitant phases of energy, hope, prosperity, and pleasure. And here he was, suddenly struck by a wind of misfortune and blown aside for the time being. His prospects and purposes dissipated. Could he continue as cheerily in the paths he had hitherto pursued? Would not his relations with Jennie be necessarily affected by this sudden tide of opposition? Was not his own home now a thing of the past, so far as his old easy-going relationship was concerned? All the atmosphere of unstained affection would be gone out of it now. That hearty look of approval which used to dwell in his father's eye, would it be there any longer? Robert, his relations with the manufactory, everything that was a part of his old life, had been affected by the sudden intrusion of Louise. It's unfortunate, was all that he thought to himself, and therewith turned from what he considered senseless brooding to the consideration of what, if anything, was to be done. I'm thinking I'd take a run up to Mount Clemens tomorrow, or Thursday anyhow, if I feel strong enough, he said to Jennie after he had returned. I'm not feeling as well as I might. A few days will do me good. He wanted to get off by himself and think. Jennie packed his bag for him at the given time, and he departed, but he was in a sullen, meditative mood. During the week that followed, he had ample time to think it all over, the result of his cogitations being that there was no need of making a decisive move at present. A few weeks more, one way or the other, could not make any practical difference. Neither Robert nor any other member of the family was at all likely to seek another conference with him. His business relations would necessarily go on as usual, since they were coupled with the welfare of the manufactory. Certainly no attempt to coerce him would be attempted. But the consciousness that he was at hopeless variance with his family weighed upon him. Bad business, he meditated. Bad business. But he did not change. For the period of a whole year, this unsatisfactory state of affairs continued. Lester did not go home for 6 months. Then, an important business conference demanding his presence, he appeared and carried it off quite as though nothing important had happened. His mother kissed him affectionately, if a little sadly. His father gave him his customary greeting, a hearty handshake. Robert, Louise, Amy, Imogene, concertedly, though without any verbal understanding, agreed to ignore the one real issue. But the feeling of estrangement was there, and it persisted. Hereafter, his visits to Cincinnati were as few and far between as he could possibly make them. Chapter 35. In the meantime, Jennie had been going through a moral crisis of her own. For the first time in her life, aside from the family attitude, which had afflicted her greatly, she realized what the world thought of her. She was bad. She knew that. She had yielded on 2 occasions to the force of circumstances which might have been fought out differently. If only she had had more courage. If she did not always have this haunting sense of fear. If she could only make up her mind to do the right thing. Lester would never marry her. Why should he? She loved him, but she could leave him and it would be better for him. Probably her father would live with her if she went back to Cleveland. He would honor her for at last taking a decent stand. Yet the thought of leaving Lester was a terrible one to her. He had been so good. As for her father, she was not sure whether he would receive her or not. After the tragic visit of Louise, she began to think of saving a little money, laying it aside as best she could from her allowance. Lester was generous, and she had been able to send home regularly $15 a week to maintain the family, as much as they had lived on before, without any help from the outside. She spent $20 to maintain the table, for Lester required the best of everything: fruits, meats, desserts, liquors, and whatnot. The rent was $55 with clothes and extras, a varying sum. Lester gave her $50 a week, but somehow it had all gone. She thought how she might economize, but this seemed wrong. Better go without taking anything if she were going, was the thought that came to her. It was the only decent thing to do. She thought over this week after week, after the advent of Louise, trying to nerve herself to the point where she could speak or act. Lester was consistently generous and kind, but she felt at times that he himself might wish it. He was thoughtful, abstracted. Since the scene with Louise, it seemed to her that he had been a little different. If she could only say to him that she was not satisfied with the way she was living, and then leave. But he himself had plainly indicated, after his discovery of Vesta, that her feelings on that score could not matter so very much to him, since he thought the presence of the child would definitely interfere with his ever marrying her. It was her presence he wanted on another basis, and he was so forceful she could not argue with him very well. She decided if she went, it would be best to write a letter and tell him why. Then maybe when he knew how she felt, he would forgive her and think nothing about it. The condition of the Gerhardt family was not improving. Since Jennie had left, Martha had married. After several years of teaching in the public schools of Cleveland, she had met a young architect, and they were united after a short engagement. Martha had been always a little ashamed of her family, and now, when this new life dawned, she was anxious to keep the connection as slight as possible. She barely notified the members of the family of the approaching marriage. Jennie not at all. And to the actual ceremony, she invited only Bass and George. Gerhardt, Veronica, and William resented the slight. Gerhardt ventured upon no comment. He had had too many rebuffs, but Veronica was angry. She hoped that life would give her an opportunity to pay her sister off. William, of course, did not mind particularly. He was interested in the possibilities of becoming an electrical engineer. a career which one of his school teachers had pointed out to him as being attractive and promising. Jennie heard of Martha's marriage after it was all over, a note from Veronica giving her the main details. She was glad from one point of view, but realized that her brothers and sisters were drifting away from her. A little while after Martha's marriage, Veronica and William went to reside with George, a break which was brought about by the attitude of Gerhardt himself. Ever since his wife's death and the departure of the other children, he had been subject to moods of profound gloom, from which he was not easily aroused. Life, it seemed, was drawing to a close for him, although he was only 65 years of age. The earthly ambitions he had once cherished were gone forever. He saw Sebastian, Martha, and George out in the world practically ignoring him, contributing nothing at all to a home which should never have taken $1 from Jennie. Veronica and William were restless. They objected to leaving school and going to work, apparently preferring to live on money which Gerhardt had long since concluded was not being come by honestly. He was now pretty well satisfied as to the true relations of Jennie and Lester. At first, he had believed them to be married, but the way Lester had neglected Jennie for long periods, the humbleness with which she ran at his beck and call, her fear of telling him about Vesta, somehow it all pointed to the same thing. She had not been married at home. Gerhardt had never had sight of her marriage certificate. Since she was away, she might have been married, but he did not believe it. The real trouble was that Gerhardt had grown intensely morose and crotchety, and it was becoming impossible for young people to live with him. Veronica and William felt it. They resented the way in which he took charge of the expenditures after Martha left. He accused them of spending too much on clothes and amusements. He insisted that a smaller house should be taken, and he regularly sequestered a part of the money which Jennie sent. For what purpose, they could hardly guess. As a matter of fact, Gerhardt was saving as much as possible in order to repay Jennie eventually. He thought it was sinful to go on in this way, and this was his one method outside of his meager earnings to redeem himself. If his other children had acted rightly by him, he felt that he would not now be left in his old age the recipient of charity from one who, despite her other good qualities, was certainly not leading a righteous life. So they quarreled. It ended one winter month when George agreed to receive his complaining brother and sister on condition that they should get something to do. Gerhardt was nonplussed for a moment, but invited them to take the furniture and go their way. His generosity shamed them for the moment. They even tentatively invited him to come and live with them. But this he would not do. He would ask the foreman of the mill he watched for the privilege of sleeping in some out-of-the-way garret. He was always liked and trusted, and this would save him a little money. So in a fit of pique, he did this, and there was seen the spectacle of an old man watching through a dreary season of nights in a lonely, trafficless neighborhood while the city pursued its gaiety elsewhere. He had a wee small corner in the topmost loft of a warehouse away from the tear and grind of the factory proper. Here Gerhardt slept by day. In the afternoon he would take a little walk, strolling toward the business center or out along the banks of the Cuyahoga or the lake. As a rule, his hands were below his back, his brow bent in meditation. He would even talk to himself a little. An occasional "by chops," or "so it is," being indicative of his dreary mood. At dusk he would return, taking his stand at the lonely gate, which was his post of duty. His meals he secured at a nearby workingmen's boarding house, such as he felt he must have. The nature of the old German's reflections at this time were of a peculiarly subtle and somber character. What was this thing, life? What did it all come to after the struggle, and the worry, and the grieving? Where does it all go to? People die. You hear nothing more from them. His wife, now, she had gone. Where had her spirit taken its flight? Yet he continued to hold some strongly dogmatic convictions. He believed there was a hell and that people who sinned would go there. How about Mrs. Gerhardt? How about Jennie? He believed that both had sinned woefully. He believed that the just would be rewarded in heaven. But who were the just? Mrs. Gerhardt had not had a bad heart. Jennie was the soul of generosity. Take his son Sebastian. Sebastian was a good boy, but he was cold and certainly indifferent to his father. Take Martha. She was ambitious, but obviously selfish. Somehow the children outside of Jennie seemed self-centered. Bas walked off when he got married and did nothing more for anybody. Martha insisted that she needed all she made to live on. George had contributed for a little while, but had finally refused to help out. Veronica and William had been content to live on Jennie's money so long as he would allow it, and yet they knew it was not right. His very existence, was it not a commentary on the selfishness of his children? And he was getting so old. He shook his head. Mystery of mysteries. Life was truly strange and dark and uncertain. Still, he did not want to go and live with any of his children. Actually, they were not worthy of him. None but Jennie, and she was not good. So he grieved. This woeful condition of affairs was not made known to Jennie for some time. She had been sending her letters to Martha, but on her leaving, Jennie had been writing directly to Gerhardt. After Veronica's departure, Gerhardt wrote to Jennie saying that there was no need of sending any more money. Veronica and William were going to live with George. He himself had a good place in a factory and would live there a little while. He returned her a moderate sum that he had saved, $115, with a word that he would not need it. Jennie did not understand. But as the others did not write, she was not sure but what it might be all right. Her father was so determined. But by degrees, however, a sense of what it really must mean overtook her, a sense of something wrong. And she worried, hesitating between leaving Lester and going to see about her father, whether she left him or not. Would he come with her? Not here, certainly. If she were married, yes, possibly. If she were alone, probably. Yet if she did not get some work which paid well, they would have a difficult time. It was the same old problem. What could she do? Nevertheless, she decided to act. If she could get $5 or $6 a week, they could live. This $115 which Gerhardt had saved would tide them over the worst difficulties, perhaps. Chapter 36. The trouble with Jennie's plan was that it did not definitely take into consideration Lester's attitude. He did care for her in an elemental way, but he was hedged about by the ideas of the conventional world in which he had been reared. To say that he loved her well enough to take her, for better or worse, to legalize her anomalous position and to face the world bravely with the fact that he had chosen a wife who suited him, was perhaps going a little too far. But he really did care for her, and he was not in the mood at this particular time to contemplate parting with her for good. Lester was getting along to that time of life when his ideas of womanhood were fixed and not subject to change. Thus far on his own plane and within the circle of his own associates, he had met no one who appealed to him as did Jennie. She was gentle, intelligent, gracious, a handmaiden to his every need, and he had taught her the little customs of polite society, until she was as agreeable a companion as he cared to have. He was comfortable. He was satisfied. Why seek further? But Jennie's restlessness increased day by day. She tried writing out her views and started a half-dozen letters before she finally worded one which seemed, partially at least, to express her feelings. It was a long letter for her, and it ran as follows. Lester, dear, when you get this, I won't be here, and I want you not to think harshly of me until you have read it all. I am taking Vesta and leaving, and I think it is really better that I should. Lester, I ought to do it. You know, when you met me, we were very poor, and my condition was such that I didn't think any good man would ever want me. When you came along and told me you loved me, I was hardly able to think just what I ought to do. You made me love you, Lester, in spite of myself. You know I told you that I oughtn't to do anything wrong anymore and that I wasn't good, but somehow when you were near me, I couldn't think just right. And I didn't see just how I was to get away from you. Papa was sick at home that time, and there was hardly anything in the house to eat. We were all doing so poorly. My brother George didn't have good shoes, and Mama was so worried. I've often thought, Lester, if Mama had not been compelled to worry so much, she might be alive today. I thought if you liked me and I really liked you, I love you, Lester. Maybe it wouldn't make so much difference about me. You know you told me right away you would like to help my family, and I felt that maybe that would be the right thing to do. We were so terribly poor. Lester, dear, I'm ashamed to leave you this way. It seems so mean. But if you knew how I have been feeling these days, you would forgive me. Oh, I love you, Lester. I do. I do. But for months past, ever since your sister came, I felt that I was doing wrong, and that I oughtn't to go on doing it. For I know how terribly wrong it is. It was wrong for me ever to have anything to do with Senator Brander. But I was such a girl then, I hardly knew what I was doing. It was wrong of me not to tell you about Vesta when I first met you, though I thought that I was doing right when I did it. It was terribly wrong of me to keep her here all that time concealed. Lester, but I was afraid of you then, afraid of what you would say and do. When your sister Louise came, it all came over me somehow clearly, and I have never been able to think right about it since. It can't be right, Lester, but I don't blame you. I blame myself. I don't ask you to marry me, Lester. I know how you feel about me and how you feel about your family, and I don't think it would be right. They would never want you to do it, and it isn't right that I should ask you. At the same time, I know I oughtn't to go on living this way. Vesta is getting along where she understands everything. She thinks you are her really, truly uncle. I've thought of it all so much. I have thought a number of times that I would try to talk to you about it, but you frighten me when you get serious, and I don't seem to be able to say what I want to. So I thought if I could just write you this and then go, you would understand. You do, Lester, don't you? You won't be angry with me? I know it's for the best for you and me. I ought to do it. Please forgive me, Lester, please. And don't think of me anymore. I'll get along, but I love you. Yes, I do. And I will never be grateful enough for all you've done for me. I wish you all the luck that can come to you. Please forgive me, Lester. I love you. Yes, I do. I love you. Jennie. P.S. I expect to go to Cleveland with Papa. He needs me. He's all alone, but don't come for me, Lester. It's best that you shouldn't. She put this in an envelope, sealed it, and having hidden it in her bosom for the time being, awaited the hour when she could conveniently take her departure. It was several days before she could bring herself to the actual execution of the plan, but one afternoon, Lester, having telephoned that he would not be home for a day or two, She packed some necessary garments for herself and Vesta in several trunks and sent for an expressman. She thought of telegraphing her father that she was coming, but seeing he had no home, she thought it would be just as well to go and find him. George and Veronica had not taken all the furniture. The major portion of it was in storage. So Gerhardt had written, she might take that and furnish a little home or flat. She was ready for the end, waiting for the expressman when the door opened and in walked Lester. For some unforeseen reason, he had changed his mind. He was not in the least psychic or intuitional, but on this occasion his feelings had served him a particular turn. He had thought of going for a day's duck shooting with some friends in the Kankakee marshes south of Chicago, but had finally changed his mind. He even decided to go out to the house early. What prompted this he could not have said. As he neared the house, he felt a little peculiar about coming home so early. Then, at the sight of the two trunks standing in the middle of the room, he stood dumbfounded. What did it mean? Jennie, dressed and ready to depart, and Vesta in a similar condition. He stared in amazement, his brown eyes keen in inquiry. Where are you going? He asked. Why, she began, falling back. I was going away. Where to? I thought I would go to Cleveland, she replied. What for? What? I meant to tell you, Lester. I didn't think I ought to stay here any longer this way. I didn't think it was right. I thought I'd tell you, but I couldn't. I wrote you a letter. A letter, he exclaimed. What the deuce are you talking about? Where is the letter? There, she said, mechanically pointing to a small center table where the letter lay, conspicuous on a large book. And you were really going to leave me, Jennie, with just a letter? Said Lester, his voice hardening a little as he spoke. I swear to heaven you are beyond me. What's the point? He tore open the envelope and looked at the beginning. Better send Vesta from the room, he suggested. She obeyed. Then she came back and stood there pale and wide-eyed, looking at the wall, at the trunks, and at him. Lester read the letter thoughtfully. He shifted his position once or twice, then dropped the paper on the floor. Well, I'll tell you, Jennie, he said finally, looking at her curiously and wondering just what he was going to say. Here again was his chance to end this relationship if he wished. He couldn't feel that he did wish it, seeing how peacefully things were running. They had gone so far together it seemed ridiculous to quit now. He truly loved her, there was no doubt of that. Still, he did not want to marry her. Could not very well. She knew that. Her letter said as much. You have this thing wrong, he went on slowly. I don't know what comes over you at times, but you don't view the situation right. I've told you before that I can't marry you. Not now, anyhow. There are too many big things involved in this, which you don't know anything about. I love you. You know that. But my family has to be taken into consideration. And the business. You can't see the difficulties raised on these scores, but I can. Now, I don't want you to leave me. I care too much about you. I can't prevent you, of course. You can go if you want to, but I don't think you ought to want to. You don't really, do you? Sit down a minute. Jennie, who had been counting on getting away without being seen, was now thoroughly nonplussed. To have him begin a quiet argument, a plea as it were, it hurt her. He, Lester, pleading with her, and she loved him so. She went over to him, and he took her hand. Now listen, he said. There's really nothing to be gained by your leaving me at present. Where did you say you were going? To Cleveland, she replied. Well, how did you expect to get along? I thought I'd take Papa if he'd come with me. He's alone now. And get something to do, maybe. Well, what can you do, Jennie? Different from what you ever have done. You wouldn't expect to be a lady's maid again, would you? Or a clerk in a store? I thought I might get some place as a housekeeper, she suggested. She had been counting up her possibilities, and this was the most promising idea that had occurred to her. No, he grumbled, shaking his head. There's nothing to that. There's nothing in this whole move of yours except a notion. Why, you won't be any better off morally than you are right now. You can't undo the past. It doesn't make any difference anyhow. I can't marry you now. I might in the future, but I can't tell anything about that, and I don't want to promise anything. You're not gonna leave me though with my consent, and if you were going, I wouldn't have you dropping back into any such thing as you're contemplating. I'll make some provision for you. You don't really want to leave me, do you, Jennie? Against Lester's strong personality and a vigorous protest, Jennie's own conclusions and decisions went to pieces. Just the pressure of his hand was enough to upset her. Now she began to cry. Don't cry, Jennie, he said. This thing may work out better than you think. Let it rest for a while. Take off your things. You're not going to leave me anymore, are you? No, she sobbed. He took her in his lap. Let things rest as they are, he went on. It's a curious world. Things can't be adjusted in a minute. They may work out. I'm putting up with some things myself that I ordinarily wouldn't stand for. He finally saw her restored to comparative calmness, smiling sadly through her tears. Now you put those things away, he said genially, pointing to the trunks. Besides, I want you to promise me one thing. What's that? Asked Jennie. No more concealment of anything, do you hear? No more thinking things out for yourself and acting without my knowing anything about it. If you have anything on your mind, I want you to come out with it. I'm not going to eat you. Talk to me about whatever is troubling you. I'll help you solve it, or if I can, at least there won't be any concealment between us. I know, Lester, she said earnestly, looking him straight in the eyes. I promise I'll never conceal anything anymore. Truly I won't. I've been afraid, but I won't be now. You can trust me. That sounds like what you ought to be, he replied. I know you will. And he let her go. A few days later, and in consequence of this agreement, the future of Gerhardt came up for discussion. Jennie had been worrying about him for several days. Now it occurred to her that this was something to talk over with Lester. Accordingly, she explained one night at dinner what had happened in Cleveland. I know he is very unhappy there all alone, she said, and I hate to think of it. I was going to get him if I went back to Cleveland, but now I don't know what to do about it. Why don't you send him money? Some money, he inquired. He won't take any more money from me, Lester, she explained. He thinks I'm not good, not acting right. He doesn't believe I'm married. He has pretty good reason, hasn't he? Said Lester calmly. I hate to think of him sleeping in a factory. He's so old and lonely. What's the matter with the rest of the family in Cleveland? Won't they do anything for him? Where's your brother, Bass? I think maybe they don't want him. He's so cross, she said simply. I hardly know what to suggest in that case, smiled Lester. The old gentleman oughtn't to be so fussy. I know, she said, but he's old now, and he has had so much trouble. Lester ruminated for a while, toying with his fork. I'll tell you what I've been thinking, Jennie, he said finally. There's no use living this way any longer, if we're going to stick it out. I've been thinking that we might take a house out in Hyde Park. It's something of a run from the office, but I'm not much for this apartment life. You and Vesta would be better off for a yard. In that case, you might bring your father on to live with us. He couldn't do any harm pottering about. Indeed, he might help keep things straight. Oh, that would just suit Papa if he'd come, she replied. He loves to fix things, and he'd cut the grass and look after the furnace, but he won't come unless he's sure I'm married. I don't know how that could be arranged unless you could show the old gentleman a marriage certificate. He seems to want something that can't be produced very well. A steady job he'd have running the furnace of a country house, he added meditatively. Jennie did not notice the grimness of the jest. She was too busy thinking what a tangle she had made of her life. Gerhardt would not come now, even if they had a lovely home to share with him. And yet he ought to be with Vesta again. She would make him happy. She remained lost in a sad abstraction until Lester, following the drift of her thoughts, said, I don't see how it can be arranged. Marriage certificate blanks aren't easily procurable. It's bad business. A criminal offense to forge one, I believe. I wouldn't want to be mixed up in that sort of thing. Oh, I don't want you to do anything like that, Lester. I'm just sorry Papa is so stubborn. When he gets a notion, you can't change him. Suppose we wait until we get settled after moving, he suggested. Then you can go to Cleveland and talk to him personally. You might be able to persuade him. He liked her attitude toward her father. It was so decent that he rather wished he could help her carry out her scheme. While not very interesting, Gerhardt was not objectionable to Lester, and if the old man wanted to do the odd jobs around a big place, why not? Chapter 37. The plan for a residence in Hyde Park was not long in taking shape. After several weeks had passed and things had quieted down again, Lester invited Jennie to go with him to South Hyde Park to look for a house. On the first trip, they found something which seemed to suit admirably. An old-time home of 11 large rooms set in a lawn fully 200 feet square and shaded by trees which had been planted when the city was young. It was ornate, homelike, peaceful. Jennie was fascinated by the sense of space and country, although depressed by the reflection that she was not entering her new home under the right auspices. She had vaguely hoped that in the planning to go away she was bringing about a condition under which Lester might have come after her and married her. Now, all that was over. She had promised to stay, and she would have to make the best of it. She suggested that they would never know what to do with so much room, but he waved that aside. We will very likely have people in now and then, he said. We can furnish it up anyhow and see how it looks. He had the agent make out a 5-year lease with an option for renewal, and set at once the forces to work to put the establishment in order. The house was painted and decorated, the lawn put in order, and everything done to give the place a trim and satisfactory appearance. There was a large, comfortable library and sitting room, a big dining room, a handsome reception hall, a parlor, a large kitchen, serving room, and in fact all the ground floor essentials of a comfortable home. On the second floor were bedrooms, baths, and the maid's room. It was all very comfortable and harmonious, and Jennie took an immense pride and pleasure in getting things in order. Immediately after moving in, Jennie, with Lester's permission, wrote to her father asking him to come to her. She did not say that she was married, but left it to be inferred. She descanted on the beauty of the neighborhood, the size of the yard, and the manifold conveniences of the establishment. "It's so very nice," she added. "You would like it, Papa. Vesta is here and goes to school every day. Won't you come and stay with us? It's so much better than living in a factory, and I would like to have you so." Gerhardt read this letter with a solemn countenance. Was it really true? Would they be taking a larger house if they were not permanently united? After all these years and all this lying, could he have been mistaken? Well, it was high time. But should he go? He had lived alone this long time now. Should he go to Chicago and live with Jennie? Her appeal did touch him, but somehow he decided against it. That would be too generous an acknowledgment of the fact that there had been a fault on his side as well as on hers. Jennie was disappointed at Gerhardt's refusal. She talked it over with Lester and decided that she would go on to Cleveland and see him. Accordingly, she made the trip, hunted up the factory, a great rumbling furniture concern in one of the poorest sections of the city, and inquired at the office for her father. The clerk directed her to a distant warehouse, and Gerhardt was informed that a lady wished to see him. He crawled out of his humble cot and came down, curious as to who it could be. When Jennie saw him in his dusty, baggy clothes, his hair gray, his eyebrows shaggy coming out of the dark door, a keen sense of the pathetic moved her again. Poor Papa, she thought. He came toward her, his inquisitorial eye softened a little by his consciousness of the affection that had inspired her visit. "What are you come for?" he asked cautiously. "I want you to come home with me, Papa," she pleaded yearningly. "I don't want you to stay here anymore. I can't think of you living here any longer, living alone any longer." "So," he said, nonplussed, "that brings you here?" "Yes," she replied. "Won't you? Don't stay here." "I have a good bed," he explained by way of apology for his state. "I know," she replied, "but we have a good home now and Vesta's there. Won't you come? Lester wants you to." "Tell me one thing," he demanded. "Are you married?" "Yes," she replied, lying hopelessly. "I've been married a long time. You can ask Lester when you come." She could scarcely look him in the face, but she managed somehow, and he believed her. "Well," he said, "it is time." "Won't you come, Papa?" she pleaded. He threw out his hands after his characteristic manner. The urgency of her appeal touched him to the quick. "Yes, I come," he said, and turned. But she saw by his shoulders what was happening. He was crying. "Now, Papa?" she pleaded. For answer, he walked back into the dark warehouse to get his things. Chapter 38. Gerhardt, having become an inmate of the Hyde Park home, at once bestirred himself about the labors which he felt instinctively concerned him. He took charge of the furnace and the yard, outraged at the thought that good money should be paid to any outsider when he had nothing to do. The trees, he declared to Jennie, were in a dreadful condition. If Lester would get him a pruning knife and a saw, he would attend to them in the spring. In Germany, they knew how to care for such things, but these Americans were so shiftless. Then he wanted tools and nails, and in time all the closets and shelves were put in order. He found a Lutheran church almost 2 miles away and declared that it was better than the one in Cleveland. The pastor, of course, was a heaven-sent son of divinity, and nothing would do but that Vesta must go to church with him regularly. Jennie and Lester settled down into the new order of living with some misgivings. Certain difficulties were sure to arise. On the north side, it had been easy for Jennie to shun neighbors and say nothing. Now they were occupying a house of some pretensions. Their immediate neighbors would feel it their duty to call, and Jennie would have to play the part of an experienced hostess. She and Lester had talked the situation over. It might as well be understood here, he said, that they were husband and wife. Vesta was to be introduced as Jennie's daughter by her first marriage, her husband, a Mr. Stover, her mother's maiden name, having died immediately after the child's birth. Lester, of course, was the stepfather. This particular neighborhood was so far from the fashionable heart of Chicago that Lester did not expect to run into many of his friends. He explained to Jennie the ordinary formalities of social intercourse, so that when the first visitor called, Jennie might be prepared to receive her. Within a fortnight, this first visitor arrived in the person of Mrs. Jacob Stendhal, a woman of considerable importance in this particular section. She lived 5 doors from Jennie. The houses of the neighborhood were all set in spacious lawns, and drove up in her carriage on her return from shopping one afternoon. "Is Mrs. Kane in?" she asked of Jeanette, the new maid. "I think so, ma'am," answered the girl. "Won't you let me have your card?" The card was given and taken to Jennie, who looked at it curiously. When Jennie came into the parlor, Mrs. Stendhal, a tall, dark, inquisitive-looking woman, greeted her most cordially. "I thought I would take the liberty of intruding on you," she said most winningly. "I'm one of your neighbors. I live on the other side of the street, some few doors up. Perhaps you have seen the house, the one with the white stone gate-posts." "Oh, yes, indeed," replied Jennie. "I know it well. Mr. Kane and I were admiring it the first day we came out here." "I know of your husband, of course, by reputation. My husband is connected with the Wilkes Frog and Switch Company." Jennie bowed her head. She knew that the latter concern must be something important and profitable from the way in which Mrs. Stendhal spoke of it. "We've lived here quite a number of years, and I know how you must feel coming as a total stranger to a new section of the city. I hope you will find time to come in and see me some afternoon. I shall be most pleased. My regular reception day is Thursday." "Indeed I shall," answered Jennie, a little nervously, for the ordeal was a trying one. "I appreciate your goodness in calling. Mr. Kane is very busy as a rule, but when he is at home, I am sure he would be most pleased to meet you and your husband." "You must both come over some evening," replied Mrs. Stendhal. "We lead a very quiet life. My husband is not much for social gatherings, but we enjoy our neighborhood friends." Jennie smiled her assurances of goodwill. She accompanied Mrs. Stendhal to the door and shook hands with her. I'm so glad to find you so charming," observed Mrs. Stendhal frankly. "Thank you," said Jennie, flushing a little. "I'm sure I don't deserve so much praise." "Well, now I will expect you some afternoon. Goodbye." And she waved a gracious farewell. That wasn't so bad, thought Jennie, as she watched Mrs. Stendhal drive away. "She's very nice, I think. I'll tell Lester about her." Among the other callers were a Mr. and Mrs. Carmichael Burke, a Mrs. Hanson Field, and a Mrs. Timothy Ballinger, all of whom left cards or stayed to chat a few minutes. Jennie found herself taken quite seriously as a woman of importance, and she did her best to support the dignity of her position. And indeed, she did exceptionally well. She was most hospitable and gracious. She had a kindly smile and a manner wholly natural. She succeeded in making a most favorable impression. She explained to her guests that she had been living on the north side until recently, that her husband, Mr. Kane, had long wanted to to have a home in Hyde Park, that her father and daughter were living here, and that Lester was the child's stepfather. She said she hoped to repay all these nice attentions and to be a good neighbor. Lester heard about these calls in the evening, for he did not care to meet these people. Jennie came to enjoy it in a mild way. She liked making new friends, and she was hoping that something definite could be worked out here, which would make Lester look upon her as a good wife and an ideal companion. Perhaps someday he might really want to marry her. First impressions are not always permanent, as Jennie was soon to discover. The neighborhood had accepted her perhaps a little too hastily, and now rumors began to fly about. A Mrs. Somerville, calling on Mrs. Craig, one of Jennie's near neighbors, and intimated that she knew who Lester was. "Oh, yes, indeed. You know, my dear," she went on, "his reputation is just a little—" She raised her eyebrows and her hand at the same time. "You don't say," commented her friend curiously. "He looks like such a staid, conservative person." "Oh, no doubt, in a way he is," went on Mrs. Somerville. "His family is of the very best. There was some young woman he went with, so my husband tells me. I don't know whether this is the one or not, but she was introduced as a Mrs. Gorwood, or some such name as that, when they were living together as husband and wife on the north side." Clicked Mrs. Craig with her tongue at this astonishing news. "You don't tell me. Come to think of it, it must be the same woman. Her father's name is Gerhardt." "Gerhardt!" exclaimed Mrs. Somerville. "Yes, that's the name. It seems to me that there was some earlier scandal in connection with her. At least, there was a child. Whether he married her afterward or not, I don't know. Anyhow, I understand his family will not have anything to do with her." "How very interesting!" exclaimed Mrs. Craig. "And to think he should have married her afterward, if he really did. I'm sure you can't tell with whom you're coming in contact these days, can you?" "It's so true. Life does get badly mixed at times. She appears to be a charming woman." "Delightful!" exclaimed Mrs. Craig. "Quite naive. I was really taken with her." "Well, it may be," went on her guest, "that this isn't the same woman after all. I may be mistaken." "Oh, I hardly think so. Gerhardt. She told me they had been living on the north side." "Then I'm sure it's the same person. How curious you should speak of her." "It is indeed," went on Mrs. Craig, who was speculating as to what her attitude toward Jennie should be in the future. Other rumors came from other sources. There were people who had seen Jennie and Lester out driving on the north side, who had been introduced to her as Miss Gerhardt, who knew what the Kane family thought. Of course, her present position, the handsome house, the wealth of Lester, the beauty of Vesta, all these things helped to soften the situation. She was apparently too circumspect, too much the good wife and mother, too really nice to be angry with. But she had a past, and that had to be taken into consideration. An opening bolt of the coming storm fell upon Jennie one day when Vesta, returning from school, suddenly asked, "Mamma, who was my papa?" "His name was Stover, dear," replied her mother, struck at once by the thought that there might have been some criticism, that someone must have been saying something. "Why do you ask?" "Where was I born?" continued Vesta, ignoring the last inquiry and interested in clearing up her own identity. "In Columbus, Ohio, pet. Why?" "Anita Ballinger said I didn't have any papa and that you weren't ever married when you had me. She said I wasn't a really, truly girl at all, just a nobody. She made me so mad I slapped her." Jennie's face grew rigid. She sat staring straight before her. Mrs. Ballinger had called, and Jennie had thought her peculiarly gracious and helpful in her offer of assistance. And now her little daughter had said this to Vesta. Where did the child hear it? You mustn't pay any attention to her, dearie, said Jennie at last. She doesn't know. Your papa was Mr. Stover, and you were born in Columbus. You mustn't fight other little girls. Of course they say nasty things when they fight. Sometimes things they don't really mean. Just let her alone and don't go near her anymore. Then she won't say anything to you. It was a lame explanation, but it satisfied Vesta for the time being. I'll slap her if she tries to slap me, she persisted. You mustn't go near her, pet, do you hear? Then she can't try to slap you, returned her mother. Just go about your studies and don't mind her. She can't quarrel with you if you don't let her. Vesta went away, leaving Jennie brooding over her words. The neighbors were talking. Her history was becoming common gossip. How had they found out? It is one thing to nurse a single thrust, another to have the wound opened from time to time by additional stabs. One day, Jennie, having gone to call on Mrs. Hanson Field, who was her immediate neighbor, met a Mrs. Williston Baker, who was there taking tea. Mrs. Baker knew of the Canes, of Jennie's history on the north side, and of the attitude of the Cane family. She was a thin, vigorous, intellectual woman, somewhat on the order of Mrs. Bracebridge, and very careful of her social connections. She had always considered Mrs. Field a woman of the same rigid circumspectness of attitude. And when she found Jennie calling there, she was outwardly calm but inwardly irritated. This is Mrs. Cane, Mrs. Baker, said Mrs. Field, introducing her guest with a smiling countenance. Mrs. Baker looked at Jennie ominously. Mrs. Lester Cane? She inquired. Yes, replied Mrs. Fields. Indeed, she went on freezingly. I've heard a great deal about Mrs. accenting the word. Mrs. Lester Cane. She turned to Mrs. Field, ignoring Jennie completely, and started an intimate conversation in which Jennie could have no possible share. Jennie stood helplessly by, unable to formulate a thought which would be suitable to so trying a situation. Mrs. Baker soon announced her departure, although she had intended to stay longer. I can't remain another minute, she said. I promised Mrs. Neal that I would stop in to see her today. I'm sure I bored you enough already as it is. She walked to the door, not troubling to look at Jennie until she was nearly out of the room. Then she looked in her direction and gave her a frigid nod. We meet such curious people now and again, she observed finally to her hostess as she swept away. Mrs. Field did not feel able to defend Jennie, for she herself was in no notable social position and was endeavoring, like every other middle-class woman of means, to get along. She did not care to offend Mrs. Williston Baker, who was socially so much more important than Jennie. She came back to where Jennie was sitting, smiling apologetically, but she was a little bit flustered. Jennie was out of countenance, of course. Presently, she excused herself and went home. She had been cut deeply by the slight offered her, and she felt that Mrs. Field realized that she had made a mistake in ever taking her up. There would be no additional exchange of visits there, that she knew. The old hopeless feeling came over her that her life was a failure. It couldn't be made right, or if it could, it wouldn't be. Lester was not inclined to marry her and put her right. Time went on, and matters remained very much as they were. To look at this large house with its smooth lawn and well-grown trees, its vines clambering about the pillars of the veranda and interlacing themselves into a transparent veil of green, To see Gerhardt pottering about the yard, Vesta coming home from school, Lester leaving in the morning in his smart trap, one would have said that here is peace and plenty. No shadow of unhappiness hangs over this charming home. And as a matter of fact, existence with Lester and Jennie did run smoothly. It is true that the neighbors did not call anymore, or only a very few of them, and there was no social life to speak of, but the deprivation was hardly noticed. There was so much in the home life to please and interest. Vesta was learning to play the piano, and to play quite well. She had a good ear for music. Jennie was a charming figure in blue, lavender, and olive green, house browns as she went about her affairs, sewing, dusting, getting Vesta off to school, and seeing that things generally were put to rights. Gerhardt busied himself about his multitudinous duties, for he was not satisfied unless he had his hands into all the domestic economies of the household. One of his self-imposed tasks was to go about the house after Lester, or the servants, turning out the gas jets or electric light bulbs which might accidentally have been left burning. That was a sinful extravagance. Again, Lester's expensive clothes, which he carelessly threw aside after a few months' use, were a source of woe to the thrifty old German. Moreover, he grieved over splendid shoes discarded because of a few wrinkles in the leather or a slightly run-down heel or sole. Gerhardt was for having them repaired, but Lester answered the old man's querulous inquiry as to what was wrong with them shoes by saying that they weren't comfortable anymore. Such an extravagance, Gerhardt complained to Jennie. Such waste. No good can come of anything like that. It will mean want one of these days. He can't help it, Papa, Jennie excused. That's the way he was raised. Ha! A fine way to be raised. These Americans, they know nothing of economy. They ought to live in Germany a while. Then they would know what a dollar can do. Lester heard something of this through Jennie, but he only smiled. Gerhardt was amusing to him. Another grievance was Lester's extravagant use of matches. He had the habit of striking a match, holding it while he talked instead of lighting his cigar, then throwing it away. Sometimes he would begin to light a cigar 2 or 3 minutes before he would actually do so, tossing aside match after match. There was a place out in one corner of the veranda where he liked to sit of a spring or summer evening, smoking and throwing away half-burned matches. Jennie would sit with him, and a vast number of matches would be lit and flung out on the lawn. At one time, while engaged in cutting the grass, Gerhardt found, to his horror, not a handful, but literally boxes of half-burned matchsticks lying unconsumed and decaying under the fallen blades. He was discouraged, to say the least. He gathered up this damning evidence in a newspaper and carried it back into the sitting room where Jennie was sewing. "See here, what I find," he demanded. "Just look at that. That man, he has no more sense of economy than a—" The right term failed him. He sits and smokes, and this is the way he uses matches. 5 cents a day, or 5 cents a box they cost. 5 cents. How can a man hope to do well and carry on like that? I like to know. Look at them." Jennie looked. She shook her head. "Lester is extravagant," she said. Gerhardt carried them to the basement. At least they should be burned in the furnace. He would have used them as lighters for his own pipe, sticking them in the fire to catch a blaze, only old newspapers were better, and he had stacks of those. Another evidence of his lord and master's wretched spendthrift disposition. It was a sad world to work in. Almost everything was against him. Still he fought as valiantly as he could against waste and shameless extravagance. His own economies were rigid. He would wear the same suit of black, cut down from one of Lester's expensive investments of years before, every Sunday for a couple of years. Lester's shoes, by a little stretch of the imagination, could be made to seem fit, and these he wore. His old ties also, the black ones, they were fine. If he could have cut down Lester's shirts, he would have done so. He did make over the underwear, which with the friendly aid of the cook's needle. Lester's socks, of course, were just right. There was never any expense for Gerhardt's clothing. The remaining stock of Lester's discarded clothing, shoes, shirts, collars, suits, ties, and whatnot, he would store away for weeks and months, and then, in a sad and gloomy frame of mind, he would call in a tailor or an old shoeman, or a ragman, and dispose of the lot at the best price he could. He learned that all second-hand clothes men were sharks, that there was no use in putting the least faith in the protests of any rag dealer or old shoeman. They all lied. They all claimed to be very poor, when as a matter of fact they were actually rolling in wealth. Gerhardt had investigated these stories. He had followed them up. He had seen what they were doing with the things he sold them. "Scoundrels," he declared. "They offer me 10 cents for a pair of shoes, and then I see them hanging out in front of their places marked $2. Such robbery, my God. They could afford to give me $1. Jennie smiled. It was only to her that he complained, for he could expect no sympathy from Lester. So far as his own meager store of money was concerned, he gave the most of it to his beloved church, where he was considered to be a model of propriety, honesty, faith, in fact, the embodiment of all the virtues. And so for all the ill winds that were beginning to blow socially, Jennie was now leading the dream years of her existence. Lester, in spite of the doubts which assailed him at times as to the wisdom of his career, was invariably kind and considerate, and he seemed to enjoy his home life. "Everything all right?" she would ask when he came in of the evening. "Sure," he would answer and pinch her chin or cheek. She would follow him in while Jeanette, always alert, would take his coat and hat. In the winter time, they would sit in the library before the big grate fire. In the spring, summer, or fall, Lester preferred to walk out on the porch, one corner of which commanded a sweeping view of the lawn and the distant street, and to light his before-dinner cigar. Jennie would sit on the side of his chair and stroke his head. "Your hair is not getting the least bit thin, Lester. Aren't you glad?" she would say, or, "See how your brow is wrinkled now? You mustn't do that. You didn't change your tie, mister, this morning." "Why didn't you? I laid one out for you." "Oh, I forgot," he would answer. Or he would cause the wrinkles to disappear, or laughingly predict that he would soon be getting bald if he wasn't so now. In the drawing room or library, before Vesta and Gerhardt, she was not less loving, though a little more circumspect. She loved odd puzzles like pigs in clover, the spider's hole, baby billiards, and the like. Lester shared in these simple amusements. He would work by the hour, if necessary, to make a difficult puzzle come right. Jennie was clever at solving these mechanical problems. Sometimes she would have to show him the right method, and then she would be immensely pleased with herself. At other times, she would stand behind him watching, her chin on his shoulder, her arms about his neck. He seemed not to mind. Indeed, he was happy in the wealth of affection she bestowed. Her cleverness, her gentleness, her tact created an atmosphere which was immensely pleasing. Above all, her youth and beauty appealed to him. It made him feel young. And if there was one thing Lester objected to, it was the thought of drying up into an aimless old age. "I want to keep young, or die young," was one of his pet remarks. And Jennie came to understand. She was glad that she was so much younger now for his sake. Another pleasant feature of the home life was Lester's steadily increasing affection for Vesta. The child would sit at the big table in the library in the evening conning her books, while Jennie would sew and Gerhardt would read his interminable list of German Lutheran papers. It grieved the old man that Vesta should not be allowed to go to a German Lutheran parochial school, but Lester would listen to nothing of the sort. "We'll not have any thick-headed German training in this," he said to Jennie, when she suggested that Gerhardt had complained. "The public schools are good enough for any child. You tell him to let her alone." There were really some delightful hours among the four. Lester liked to take the little 7-year-old schoolgirl between his knees and tease her. He liked to invert the so-called facts of life, to propound its paradoxes and watch how the child's budding mind took them. "What's water?" he would ask, and being informed that it was what we drink, he would stare and say, "That's so, but what is it? Don't they teach you any better than that?" "Well, it is what we drink, isn't it?" persisted Vesta. "The fact that we drink it doesn't explain what it is," he would retort. "You ask your teacher what water is, and then he would leave her with this irritating problem troubling her young soul. Food, china, her dress, anything was apt to be brought back to its chemical constituents, and he would leave her to struggle with these dark suggestions of something else back of the superficial appearance of things until she was actually in awe of him. She had a way of showing him how nice she looked before she started school in the morning, a habit that arose because of his constant criticism of her appearance. He wanted her to look smart. He insisted on a big bow of blue ribbon for her hair. He demanded that her shoes be changed from low quarter to high boots with the changing character of the seasons, and that her clothing be carried out on a color scheme suited to her complexion and disposition. "That child's light and gay by disposition. Don't put anything somber on her," he once remarked. Jennie had come to realize that he must be consulted in this, and would say, "Run to your papa and show him how you look." Vesta would come and turn briskly around before him, saying, "See? Yes, you're all right, go on." And on she would go. He grew so proud of her that on Sundays and some weekdays, when they drove, he would always have her in between them. He insisted that Jennie send her to dancing school, and Gerhardt was beside himself with rage and grief. "Such irreligion," he complained to Jennie. "Such a devil's folderol. Now she goes to dance. What for? To make a no good out of her, a creature to be ashamed of?" "Oh no, Papa," replied Jennie. "It isn't as bad as that. This is an awful nice school. Lester says she has to go." Lester, that man. A fine lot he knows about what is good for a child. A card player, a whiskey drinker. "Now hush, Papa, I won't have you talk like that," Jennie would reply warmly. "He's a good man, and you know it." Yes, a good man. In some things, maybe, but not in this, no. He went away groaning. When Lester was near, he said nothing, and Vesta could wind him around her finger. "Oh, you," she would say, pulling at his arm or rubbing his grizzled cheek. There was no more fight in Gerhardt when Vesta did this. He lost control of himself. Something welled up and choked his throat. "Yes, I know how you do," he would exclaim. Vesta would tweak his ear. "Stop now," he would say. "That's enough." It was noticeable, however, that she did not have to stop unless she herself willed it. Gerhardt adored the child, and she could do anything with him. He was always her devoted servitor.